Hello and welcome to our August Dialogue. My name is Tom Dennis and I'm the CEO of Serenity and Leadership. We're premier conflict resolution, culture integration and change specialists who help businesses overcome challenges and achieve successful, lasting outcomes, whilst always putting their people at the heart of the business. We work at a systemic level because that's where we feel the greatest change can take place. And if we don't address it at that level, then nothing really is going to change. Our core expertise is identifying and improving cultures, in particular focusing on making them safer, happier, and more inclusive. We believe that the styles of leadership that got us to where we are today are not the ones that will take us forward in the future. So we work on really the skills of leadership. In today's session, our focus is people before profit, well-being's place in the boardroom. And I'm delighted to be able to welcome Stephen Whitton, who's the CEO of Men Able, and I will introduce him shortly. The purpose of these dialogue sessions is for people to learn from each other and to be able to take away something new which they can apply in their life and their business. By the end, we hope that you will have learned something new, and we really invite those who might have an interest to get in touch with us if we might have a conversation about what's going on in your organization. We're recording this session, and there'll be two versions. The video of the full event will be made available through a link just to the people who attend today. And then there'll be a shorter version, which will just have Steve's talk in it, and that will be on public availability through our YouTube channel. The agenda for today, we'll do a check-in in a moment, and then I'll introduce Steve and he will give his talk. At the end of that, I'll invite you all to go into breakout rooms and just very briefly in pairs explore what you've heard and what really has touched you. Then we'll come back into the plenary and we'll have a session, everybody joining in the dialogue. Then at the end of that, there'll be a short moment for concluding thoughts, and I'll then invite Steve to give his final thoughts at the end of the whole session. So first off, check-in. You can see now my Russian man waving his hand, which I've been hoping to share with you the last two sessions. So just a quick check-in for everybody, half a minute for each person, and when we're finished, I'll bring you back into the plenary. So welcome back. I hope that was helpful. Now, I just want to do a very quick commercial, because if we do this at the end, then some people will have left. So if you have any needs or interests, we are a culture change organization passionate about what we do. Please drop us a note at hello@serenityandleadership.com. Please also join the community, the LinkedIn community, where we've been gathering followers for really a year and a half. And it's a place where people can join in and explore further some of the things that come up from them during the dialogues. There's a Slack community as well, if that's helpful to you. And at the end, we'll send you a link to a feedback form. Please do complete that. It really helps us to ensure that we're doing the best that we can do. And then a very short commercial for next month, when Gamal Turawa, or G as he likes to be called, will be coming and talking to us about intersectionality. That's on the 16th of September. But I don't want to take the spotlight away from Stephen, so I'd like now to introduce him. Stephen is the founder of Men Able. It's a global movement for mental health support in the automotive sector. After a successful career of over 35 years in the industry, covering numerous roles from salesman to executive director, he is a renowned authority on employee well-being. He's a passionate speaker whose pragmatic and insightful approach has inspired many, many people in audiences across the world. Menable was created on the back of Stephen's own struggles with a clear purpose and mission to change cultures in male-dominated and performance-driven businesses, enabling the mental health stigma to be removed. And I'll just say that, I mean, that's Stephen's sort of standard introduction, but I really am delighted to see him here today. He's had an extraordinarily difficult journey over the last year, and it's great to have him here. Stephen, the stage is yours.
Yeah, as Tom rightly said, I am the founder of Menable. It's an organization that spans across the automotive industry, which globally is immense. It's huge. Quite frankly, without the automotive industry, the world would come to a standstill, because it's so important across everything that touches everyone, really. So, and we have our issues, and I've been in and around it for 35 years. And my view really around the whole mental health and well-being thing is that this is needs a seat of its own in the boardroom. This is not something to offset to HR or to the well-being team or to training. This sits with the CEO, the chief execs, the CVO, the CTO, everyone else in the C-suite, and MDs downwards. And it really should be a top-down thing that's taken on board by businesses. So that's what I want to share with you today in terms of those thoughts around that. I think we'd all agree that 2020 in particular, and actually a good portion of this year as well, has been quite reflective. You know, for many people, it's been an opportunity to sit back and think, well, what is life really all about? And you've got to argue that actually life is probably conceivably better than it's ever been. We've got more at our disposal. We've got more opportunity out there, and we certainly don't lack technology or anything that makes life easier day to day. So why is it then that there are more people feeling hopeless, more people that are depressed, more people that are alone or feeling empty? And why is it that there is this sort of strong feeling of you know, being overwhelmed and not having a sense of purpose across lives in general, not just in business? And I have to say that where my journey has taken me is realizing that, you know, that's what I needed to find in my own life. If we had a bit longer, I would tell you the full story of Menable and how that came about. But in short, 10 years ago, March 2009, I'm standing on a railway platform at Milton Keynes station where I live, and they have some fast trains coming through there. And the announcer said, please stand well back, as the next train at platform 4 doesn't stop here. And in that moment, my thoughts went to, this could be it. I see the appeal of a fast moving train. Within a second, my thoughts then went to the driver, the 100 people on the platform, the police and ambulance services, and all of my family who would then be questioning for the rest of their lives what was going through his mind that made him do that. And all of that happened in a nanosecond that stopped me in my tracks, literally, and made me start to think, this isn't me. This is not me. This is not the person who I am. And it started really a 10-year journey of thinking about, well, what is my purpose? What am I here for? I've done the societal expectation of getting married, having kids, having a mortgage, contributing to the environment and to the economy and to the progression of mankind and all of that stuff. But now I was feeling a bit lacking in purpose. And so that 10-year journey continued. My world has been the car industry. It's been the automotive sector. I've run a dealership. There's me at the top there, handing over a vehicle, brand new car, to a young lad called Tobias, who actually had been having some fairly severe cancer treatment at the time, and he wanted to spend his money on getting a brand new car. And his parents supported that, and they came to me, and we wanted to make sure that we looked after him. And that was one of the pivotal moments for me at the end of a 35-year career that started probably 3 stone ago, as you can see from the picture down at the bottom right, that also resulted in me having a wife, 2 kids, 9 jobs along the way, including some time in self-employment. And so pressure was my middle name. Stress and anxiety and pressure to get the job done was what I carried with me every single day. But a turning point in this picture at the top with me handing that car over to Tobias was the following day getting a phone call from my boss to say, "Why did you do that deal? It lost 200 quid. And he wouldn't listen to my explanation that the lad was very much involved with the Youth Cancer Trust and that the PR that came from it could be immense. He wasn't interested. All he was interested in was that we'd lost £200 on that car. And that also then made me start thinking, there's other stuff going on here and I need to be really properly aligned with what's my purpose, because my purpose is not to work in a transactional business and pump cars out left, right and center every day. So what I did was began a process of building around me an invisible wall, a protective cloak that I call ego. And ego, we often think about that thing that causes you to buy the house you're in, drive the car you drive, wear what you wear, buy into brands and so on. But actually ego is a fairly well-known protective mechanism for us as individuals. And it's something that many people are very, and me in particular, was very well practiced at kind of shielding myself in as a way of really sort of being the person that I was. Put me on stage with a microphone in front of me, and I would have people saying to me at the end of the day, "Wow, you're so confident, you're so passionate. You know, I wouldn't want to do what you do, stand up in front of an audience." And the reality of it was, that's a front, that's a mask, because the real person was the person who was sitting, feeling lonely, abandoned, and rejected in a room, all on my own. So, to cut a very, very long story short, and the creation of Men Able was actually this time, well, a bit more than this time last year, sitting in my garden thinking about the opportunities in front of me. And when the whole thing fell apart, my life really crumbled in terms of the lid falling off of my own issues, and my family not reacting in the way that I expected. And they then, you know, we went down the route of that's ended in divorce and separation and breakup and sale of the house and all of that. And so it made me really stop again and think, well, there's 2 roads here, the road of hope and the road of despair. And both of them lead to the same destination, but the road of despair is probably likely to get you there a bit quicker. So I chose the road of hope, and that was where Men Able was born and created. And I then went out to the industry that I love and I'm passionate about, and started talking to some of my good connections across that industry who are in the main very senior people, and started to say, am I the only person of a certain age across this industry that suffered with mental health and has kept a lid on it? Am I the only one that's built this ego around me and it's all about what car I drive and what I wear? Am I the only one that stopped, you know, having a properly fruitful life because of the voice in my head and what's going on in my own mental health? And was absolutely blown away by the amount of them that came forward and said, no, you're not alone. It's rife. It's absolutely across every business. It's across every part of the industry. And so now what we're working on is awareness, education, and prevention around that. And we work on a scale of 1 to 10, that we say, well, everyone's got mental health. If somebody walked into a business with their arm in a sling or a cast on their leg, you'd have a conversation about it. But just because mental health can't be seen doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And let's not wait till it gets to an 8 or a 9 before we deal with it, because that's the crisis point. And so what I'm seeing across our industry in particular, and also other industries where I'm studying this, is that what we're doing is we're putting a lot of emphasis on injury management. We're putting emphasis on triaging mental health crises when they arrive. And that's all very good and that's great. But in the industry that I've been in, my problem was that I was a 1 to 7 on a scale that was going up or down depending on what was happening for me. I never got to 8 or 9, apart from that time on the platform that day, and also a couple of times during the course of the last 18 months. And that suggests to me that what the industry that I'm in, and then I look around other industries and see it happening there, what that industry wasn't doing was it wasn't preparing to take care of my psychological safety and my psychological needs. It was ready to step in when I had a crisis. But what if I was that typical man of a certain age that doesn't talk about it, doesn't want to open up, doesn't want to share my thoughts and feelings, doesn't want to be honest and open and authentic, because actually I'm worried about what other people are going to think. I'm worried about what the industry is going to judge me as, and what that's going to do to my career and my progression and everything that goes with that. So that's what caused me to keep a lid on it. So now we're talking to leaders and we're saying, so if that's the case, if that's the culture in your business, if that's what's happening across your business, don't bring in mental health first aiders, because that's great and it's a fantastic initiative, but it doesn't do the job. Because what if your mental health first aider is off that day when I have my crisis? This is you're the CEO of the business, it's your responsibility. If you're an MD of a business, it's your responsibility. If you're a manager of a business, your job is not to manage process, your job is to manage people. And therefore it's your responsibility, because every single one of us is on this scale of 1 through to 10. So let's not just do what we need to do to put stuff in place for 8, 9, or 10. Let's make sure that we deal with the stuff that's 1 through to 7. And that's why we believe that well-being and health, and mental health in particular, needs to have a seat in the boardroom and be properly bought into by everyone that's at the most senior levels. Now, in our industry alone, some scary numbers. Relate this to your own industry, and if you want, but I'm just talking here about the automotive sector. Just short of 1 million people that work in that sector. And if the World Health Organization is correct that 1 in 4 report a mental health issue at any one time, that's 216,000 people right now in the automotive sector suffering with their mental health. If the suicide rate is 17 in 100,000, that's potentially 146 colleagues in the next year could take their own life. Now, with the average car dealership, if any of you have bought a car at any point in the last couple of years, you may have gone into a car dealership, and you'll see that if it's a really big dealership, it could have anywhere in the region of 70 or 80 staff working in that business. So that's potentially 2 entire businesses of people that could be considering taking their life. And my argument is, if you're a CEO, you need to take this seriously, because if you put all those 146 people into an aeroplane and it crashed, you would certainly have an inquiry and find out what went wrong. So why are we not doing this every day with our people and not sitting back and saying, well, it's okay, we've ticked the box, we've got mental health first aiders. Well, that's great, but I've never felt the need to actually sit and talk to Sally on reception and say, I'm really struggling with my mental health, can you help me? Because actually my mental health has hovered through 1 through to 7 for 20 years. It does not mean that I'm suddenly going to have a crisis and feel safe at work and open up about stuff. So we really need to make sure that this stuff sits at the boardroom level. And when we do that, what's then at the core of this in organizations? And I'm fresh from a workshop that I ran yesterday, and the resounding thing that came out of this particular board of management, this particular group of CEOs that I had together, was that there's one key thing that the organization needs to communicate that people don't feel clear on, and it's their purpose. In the business that I worked in that sold cars, our purpose was sell cars, make money, keep the shareholders happy. Is it any wonder that that business wasn't fulfilling for me? That wasn't hitting my psychological needs, because they put profit before people. They didn't care how we got there. They just wanted us to sell cars. In our movement, we have another organization based up in Scotland, a massive company, really good company. And the head of that business is a 35-year-old entrepreneur. And his purpose for that business is, we make money so we can give it away. And that's very clear throughout the entire business, that everyone then says, I know exactly what my role is in that business. I can earn a lot of money, I can earn commission, but I know that actually ultimately the purpose of this business is to give money away to other people who need it more. And that's what we're on a mission to do now, is to say to CEOs and leaders of businesses, what's the purpose of your business? What does that look like? And more importantly, if I went around your organization and asked each and every person, what is the purpose of your business? What clear answer would they give me? The three biggest things that actually hold people back as well are, according to Simon Bartlett recently on a LinkedIn post, lack of freedom to be creative or flexible. I link that back to, well, the lack of freedom coming because I don't have a clear idea of what purpose is. Poor communication. People often read more into what leaders don't say than what they do say. And again, that comes back to what's the purpose of the business? And looking around us and seeing that there are people who are being let off, getting away with stuff, not removing a particular insert, whatever descriptive word you would use for those colleagues in there, colleague or manager fast enough who's not performing. Everyone else can see it, but it's not happening. And again, that links back to purpose. It links back to how clear is it in our organization? And that is why well-being sits in the boardroom, because that's their responsibility. Bring that down to the individuals, and what we see on a daily basis is people, and you'll probably know people like this in your organization, that work on any of these four levels. Victim, these are the people that it's, you know, oh, how are you today? Oh, same rubbish, different day. You know, oh yeah, just same old, same old. You know, people who are in victim, the world is acting on them. The world is working on them. Move that up a gear. And when sometimes when people become managers, they feel that they can now be a controller of that, and they can start trying to push and cajole people's opinions and thoughts and beliefs. Both of those behavioral states, those levels of consciousness, are in a fear-based, are on a sort of fear basis, if you like. And that also then can be spotted by people like me and Tom, who do the sort of work that we do, and one or two others as well, Sue, who I know is on here as well. You know, we can spot that a mile off when we go into organizations, because you can see who are the victims and who are the controllers. And what our mission is to say, look, you can go into Discoverer, because at Discoverer, that's where the world of possibilities start to open up, and you can start to see where your purpose is lacking across your business, and you start looking for opportunities. Get into Change Agent, that's a whole new conversation and transcends everything. But isn't that amazing feeling when you look at that and think controller and victim is fear-based, Discoverer and Change Agent is love-based. And we're stuck in the English language because we only have one word for love. You see the word love there and you immediately probably think of the same thing. But if you think of the word love and think of the many connotations that it has, put that into a business and it suddenly transcends it to something completely different. So purpose then, in Emily Esfahani-Smith's book, a book about meaning, she talks about purpose. It's what you give and how you serve. It's the why that drives you. What is it that you're actually doing? What is the service that you do? You know, we were all born to serve. The problem is most people don't realize why. And it's through service that you find joy and abundance. So if you're a leader of a business, let's not put things in place that manage those issues when mental health problems come up. You know, let's just make it in the same way that we do with physical health and safety. You know, it's not about putting banisters up or putting high-vis jackets on the back of people's chairs to let them know who's the fire warden. You know, this is about giving people a sense of purpose so that they know what the why is that drives them. And out of that will fall everything you do around training, recruitment, management, competence within your business, the way people feel, everything. That then gives people a sense of belonging. And on the back of that, that's where love comes in and the ability to forgive and work closer together. Now, this sounds very spiritual, and I make no apologies for that, because through this process, what I've managed to find is that I knew I had a reasonable level of emotional intelligence. Compared to my peers at the rather rough school that I went to in North London, I had a reasonably good level of intellectual intelligence. But what I've learned through all of this is spiritual intelligence. And that, again, takes you to a completely different level. And it gives you, put all of that together, gives you a sense of self, and that you're working on something that this is bigger. And again, I would say, if well-being and health is at the boardroom level within a business, this is about transcending all of that. And then the key bit is it's through people like us and through working with people like you that actually we can help change the narrative. We can help change the story that we've all been telling ourselves. And the automotive industry is one of the worst places. that needs this, because, you know, people in that industry carry job changing as a bit of a badge of honor. Where have you worked through your career? Oh, I've worked in 9 jobs and I've done this, 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 and this. Oh, wow, you must be good if you've moved around a lot. Because actually what we need to do is rewrite that narrative and say, well, if that's the case, that's fine. But actually for most people, it doesn't work. So I'm going to ask you now to do a little bit of I'm going to go quiet for maybe 30 seconds or a minute and ask you individually to grab a piece of paper and a pen and just quickly jot down as a snapshot of your culture, each area for your business that you work in, your own, whether it's your own business, you can pick a client if you're a consultant, but the business that you work in, and I know Gemma's on here as well from Nuneaton College, so you might want to think about this for either from your own particular department or from the wider business. Let's have a quick look. Out of 5, mark each of those areas for management commitment, communication, training, recruitment, and purpose. Okay, I didn't time that particularly, but what I should have said at the beginning was don't overthink it. Don't try and sort of analyze it. Just put a gut feel. If your gut feel is something's at a 1 or a 2 or 3 or whatever it is, then put that, because that's probably accurate and probably right. It's not for you to actually go and fix it. It's for you to get a sense of where are you actually at, because my objective and Tom's objective for this session was not to, sell MenAble or anything like that. But if we can inspire any one of you to think, yeah, we need a version of that in our business. And actually, if I'm on the board, then I am high enough in the organization to be able to properly affect this and say, yeah, this is a board level responsibility. The board cannot any longer say, what do we do about health and well-being? Oh, we've implemented an employee, an EPA, an employee assistance program. We can't no longer say that we've appointed mental health first aiders. This sits with the board and it is their responsibility, and it absolutely should be. And that is about putting people before profit. And why should we do that? Well, it's quite simple, because actually there's lots of proof, and there's lots of proof in the work that we do, that positive employee outcomes equal positive customer outcomes, which actually in the end equals positive business outcomes. So thank you very much. I'm Steve Whitton. Please stay in touch. We'd love to be in touch with any of you. My LinkedIn address is there. I'm all over that, as many of you will probably already know if we're connected, that I'm pretty much on there prolifically every day. So please feel free to connect, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. And Tom, I think we're now going to go to a bit of a Q&A, if I'm if I'm correct.
We're going to go breakout first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd let go of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea now is, and thank you, Steve. It's funny, I wasn't quite sure where you were going to go with your talk, but purpose is just so important. And funnily enough, my thought for the week, I've been doing a thought for the week, which I put out on the website and on LinkedIn. The thought for the week this week is on purpose. But I've been looking at the difference in the sense of what the purpose was in Afghanistan, and so that's where I've gone with it, because we're seeing lived out the dissonance when you don't get the purpose right. Okay, so what I'm going to invite you to do now is just to go into pairs. We've got some breakout rooms which I'll open in a second, and just take 30 seconds to introduce each other so that you know who you're talking to, just brief, and then take a minute each way to reflect on what you've heard and what's touched you. And then I'll bring you back in. It's quite quick, because we want the focus on the dialogue, but just to help you get your thinking really clear. So I'm going to invite you to go to a room and we'll see you back shortly. Okay, so everybody, welcome back. So a word about dialogue. This is based on the work of David Bohm, who was a quantum physicist, actually. And his belief was that really the problems that we've got today cannot be solved using normal ways. We've got to get people together to talk and to really, really listen to each other. So if you can imagine, as we go into this dialogue, that you're sitting in a circle. It's the oldest way of meeting for human beings. There's often been a fire in the middle. And when people have spoken, they've spoken to the fire, not to other individuals. So I really encourage you to think, firstly, why do I want to speak? What is it that I want to say? And is it just for me? Or am I putting something out there that might be helpful? We really encourage a reflection on feelings and thoughts as they arise. And if you can try and avoid sort of talking to someone else, you can say, oh, I've heard this is what it makes me feel, or that's really helped me, and now I think this kind of thing. So that's really the fundamental of the dialogue. And a couple of ground rules. We treat each other with kindness and respect, and we listen with compassion and curiosity, and we honor each other's unique ways. One of the things that's fascinating about these dialogues is that, for me, certainly, I so often get a real realization of just how we are all different. And it's honoring that difference that makes such a very positive potential difference. Confidentiality, as I say, it is being recorded, but it is just for you, the attendees here. So we hold what is spoken in this circle as confidential. And we trust that in silence, people are processing, and they will speak what is true for them. So don't be afraid of the silence. Don't feel the need to fill it, because that is kind of a bit of a natural tendency. Having said all that, really, I would just say the floor is open. I'd encourage Steve, if there's questions that come that you feel you could answer, try and hold them and answer them in any reflections you make at the end if they haven't been answered during the course of the dialogue. I'd really like people to sort of engage with each other now on what is arising, having heard and having had that short time together in pairs. So the floor is open.
Stunned everyone into silence.
So I was very interested in the word purpose. And I'm afraid I did come a little late, so it might have been covered. When I saw we were talking about the purpose of the organization, of course, it reminded me, of course, how important that was. I also am thinking how important it is for each individual to understand and know their own purpose, which is a separate thing, and a self-motivator. So I just wanted to put that out there. You might already have spoken about that, but so I'm giving that to the fire.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I was reflecting in my breakout group around, firstly, that when we had to rate our organizations, I rated mine low on purpose. I've been there for nearly 3 years. I was like, actually, I don't think we have a purpose. I had to Google it, and we don't. We have a vision. We don't have a purpose. I could take like hazard a guess at what it is, but we don't have a stated purpose. But it also made me reflect on myself, because I think COVID has made us all sort of think about like, what is the purpose of life? So that piece around personal purpose versus organizational purpose really resonates with me. And I think sometimes I feel a tension of working for a law firm, and if it really aligns with my values, And I sort of feel, I don't know the answer to that, but what I think is, it's sort of like changing things from within. So I could be in another organization that I might feel sort of aligns more with my values, but I feel like actually the organization I'm in really needs me to be challenging and questioning. And I know I'm not very popular, but that's what I've been hired to do. But yes, certainly a chargeable hours model, which rewards people based on being fully utilized or overutilized, sort of flies in the face of well-being, because working long hours is like a sign of success almost. So there was a lot of things that Steve said that got me thinking and reflecting.
I think what's still standing out for me is the fact that we're sitting here with 80% ladies, and from what I have seen so far, no offense, please do not take that from me, but I would say we do not have one CEO in this group. We have people listening here who are interested in the topic, which is pretty much the same. Like, I'm going into a company and I say, well, we should talk about mental and physical well-being. And then this is the group I'm ending up with, where they say, well, let's start with HR because they are only girls, or start with marketing because there's the majority of ladies. And I'm struggling taking my work into boardrooms. I think what we need is to focus on this change, which is happening. The last 15 months obviously really made us rethink, everybody rethink, companies rethink, individuals rethink their purpose, their way of working, their way of living. But at the end of the day, we still have men in leading positions, and they say, well, I'm strong, I can deal with this. Maybe my one-to-one partner just a minute ago, she said, because men don't have the voice, they don't have the words to put this into they just can't express that problem they may have, or they just, well, I don't have a problem, I'm a man. Like you said, Steve, you were afraid of judgment, you were afraid of what effect it had on your career, and the simple fact of showing feelings rather than strength is what would your peers or even your boss at the time thinking, oh, what's wrong with him? And I think that's what needs to change. I would hope that in the next of those talks you're doing, you have the same amount of people, but 80% of those should be CEOs. And I think this just calls for corporations of some sort, where you just, I don't know, where people work together on different angles in that. I don't know how that could look like, but it was just a thought.
So I feel that we should be really careful not to make assumptions and judgments about groups of people. So the time of day, for example, 12 midday might be one reason why many CEOs, and I actually would call myself a CEO. I might not be in a multinational corporation, but I do run my own business and I would call myself a CEO. But many CEOs aren't able to attend in the middle of a workday. And also, I would be very wary about the assumptions about how men articulate themselves. I mean, I know many men who are very articulate about their well-being and how they're feeling. I'm not saying that not every man can, but also that we don't categorize any groups of people into, oh, well, they'll be better at this or they'll be better at that. There was a couple of things that I wanted to mention. One thing, last night I couldn't sleep for some reason, so I listened to a podcast, and there was an advert on the podcast from HP, as in Hewlett Packard, and their advert was essentially a recruitment advert to recruit people into the organisation or to the business. And instead of saying, we are brilliant, we do this, we do that, come and work in this department, they said, we value people. We are a diverse, inclusive organisation. And these are the ways that we're diverse and inclusive. We value, we champion challenge, and we want you to challenge our opinions. So come and work for us and be part of the solution. And I thought that was really nice. And going back to what Steve was saying about kind of purpose and setting and communicating that purpose. For me, at 4 in the morning, lying in bed, listening to my podcast, I thought, if I had run a business, I would look to see if I could work for Hewlett Packard. And I thought, I wonder if I can contact them and see if they would, if I could work with them through my business Celebrating Disability. So I think it was a really good example of exactly what you've just said, Steve, about knowing your purpose and then being able to really succinctly communicate that out to engage people. I thought that was really, really good. And the other thing is kind of a comment / question. So you may want to kind of wait till the end and see if anyone else answers. But, just on the slide about kind of starting at the bottom, being a victim, and then at the top, kind of the change agent. And again, for me, I would be really mindful, and I am really mindful, that I don't make any assumptions about what other people are capable of when it comes to their own mental health and their own mental well-being. So I'm a very confident person, for example, and I do see myself as well as a challenger and a change maker. But if somebody isn't, and if somebody's had a bad day and wants to talk about that bad day, and it might seem as they're talking about it a lot, I try not to look at it as in they are a victim or they're seeing themselves as, but they're seeing themselves as kind of trapped by the system. I try to look at it as, what can I do to support this person? Where are they at the moment? And what else is going on for them as well? And I know that you're not giving like a general overview, but I'm always mindful that, just that really. So thank you.
I wanted to go on the point of it. Someone, I think it was Carol, brought up the fact that there's 80% women, like stark numbers as well. It's 2 men and then myself, who is going through a gender identity experience. And I think I can speak a little bit from the male experience because for 30 years I did identify as a man. We aren't equipped with the tools to talk about our emotions. The men who are equipped with those tools are men who have done a lot of self-reflection. They've done a lot of work to develop those tools themselves. They've done a lot of communication. I developed those tools by talking to women, by communicating with women on how they felt and what they were going through, and seeing how that related to myself. There's other ways to do it, but for the most part, men aren't given those tools. And I just finished I'm doing a presentation on Sunday called Yes All Men. And a major part of that is about how patriarchy, misogyny, and toxic masculinity has a huge impact on men's mental health. Steve, you come from the automotive industry. I've come from the rail industry before I came to the Eco Group and became a consultant. There's so many issues with both industries, and wherever I see industries that are male dominated, I just see industries that people aren't talking, they're not communicating, they're not sharing, they're guarded, they're protecting their it's a wall to protect themselves, but that means that they're damaging themselves because they're not getting the support they need, and they're not able to open up and discuss this. And being able to talk about your mental health, your emotional state, is the best way to fix it.
Well, I could put a couple of words in. We've been running the dialogues now for a couple of years in various forms. They've all been targeted at CEOs or senior leaders. And by definition, that means that they've been largely targeted at men. And we've run these in the evening. We've run them early in the morning. And at the moment, we're running them at lunchtimes. The fact is that men, particularly men, but also I think to a lesser extent, women who are in positions of that level of responsibility don't come to these kind of events. It's been a source of frustration and creativity because we've been looking for all sorts of ways to encourage these people to come and speak. I've just put out one of our re-edited a podcast that we have with Scilla Elworthy, who is an amazing, amazing woman. And one of the things we talk about there is dialogue. And she's a peace builder, for those that don't know her. She's an extraordinary, a change agent of amazing stature. And we talk about dialogue, and the difficulty is that that's where the healing comes, is when you can get people together and talk. And that takes time. And whilst always there is the mindset that time is money, then it is going to be a great challenge to involve the people who need to be involved. So for me, it is an ongoing source of great challenge. We haven't given up. And where there is an organization where the CEO, and it is really the CEO typically, has the openness of mind to say, we have a culture and I would like to have a different culture. I'd like to have a better culture, and defines what that means, then we can make an amazing difference. But it needs that openness. And so Steve used the word love, and I think it is so fundamental, because actually it is a bit for so many people who have developed quite dysfunctional masculine traits in order to get to the top of organizations. The concept of love at one level is going to switch them off completely, because they think it's got nothing to do with business. But at another level, I think it's the only way in. And so for me personally, finding a way to love the people who don't want to engage in something because it's actually so threatening to them is really the core of our work. And I don't have any solutions there, but that is, I think, what's most important.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think that completely agree with what you and Steve are saying about how it needs to be led from the top down. It's the CEO and it's the C-level that leads this, but also that everybody in the company or the organization, the business, has a responsibility to develop this culture and to develop a place where people feel psychologically safe, and then they can, you know, I don't really go into bringing your whole self to work, because I don't think anyone brings their whole self to work. I certainly don't, you know, otherwise I would be swearing all the time, for example, and I would be in my pajamas and I'd be talking about Robbie Williams. So I don't bring my whole self to work, and I don't think it's authentic to say that I do. But a place where people can feel safe to express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves. I think that everybody has that responsibility. I definitely agree that it's the top level's responsibility to set that culture and then to role model behavior in order for everybody else to know what their responsibility is, and then to know how to do it as well. And then, you know, so yeah, So I kind of, when I talk to organizations, we create kind of, I suppose you call them these days, fireside chats. These names kind of go around, don't they? Fireside chats or courageous conversations, or whatever the popular buzzword of the week is there, so that people can share. But for me, I use my lived experience of disability. So I start with my own experience, talking predominantly, well, all about disability inclusion, start with my own experience, and then lead out from there to invite people and guide people about the safety and how to share their own experiences and how to be that ally to listen to others, and then to take action from what somebody said about kind of how to implement and challenge that culture in that way.
I think it's just such a really difficult topic, and I hear what Tom says, absolutely, that it can sometimes be quite a dangerous place to go to if somebody fundamentally doesn't hold the same views as you do and doesn't want to know about making changes. And you can take they say, I've got just as much of a right as you have to hold these views. So I don't think there's any really easy answer, which I certainly don't have an easy answer. I think you have to be true to yourself at the end of the day. And if somebody else doesn't agree with you or sees the world through totally different eyes, I don't know how you can change that. And who's to say at the end of the day that they're wrong and you're right? You may know you're right and be convinced that they're wrong, but they won't see it like that. And trying to change other people who have very, very, very strong beliefs, and they've developed a culture around those beliefs, is a real challenge. And I don't, as I say, I don't have the answer, but I do, I think, understand some of the issues that we've been talking about this morning. Hope that makes sense. That's a bit of a waffle.
I think personally speaking, from coming from a college, FE college, been in for many years now, I think frustration is a word, and Steve and myself have tried, sorry, I've just lost the screen. Steve and myself have tried, or I'm trying to get Steve into North Warwickshire and South Leicester College. Obviously, I believe in him from my mortal lower level, but it has to be from up above, Steve. And I'm guessing that you haven't heard from anything since it went to HR. They didn't know where to put you, did they, Steve? I think was a word. They wanted to put Steve in a box.
They didn't have a box for me. Yeah,
they didn't have a box. They wanted to know, was he there for the students? Was he there for the staff? Was he there, and it wasn't a clear definition, because it isn't. It's everyone, isn't it? So their response, I think, Steve, was of no surprise to you, was it? It's very frustrating for me. There's so much red tape around working for an institution like a college. So I'm looking at it in two folds, really. In the sense of a purpose for me, is to get the students to be the best possible, beings that they can be ready for work. So I predominantly work within automotive, construction and engineering. So they are three predominantly male. 90% of the students are male. So in terms of getting them to open up and having wellbeing groups, it's quite tricky, but it's not impossible. But it's just trying to get that belief within other areas as well. So whilst I know what, as he was saying about it, we're not sort of pigeonholing and saying every male, but on Steve's side, automotive, construction, engineering are predominantly male. So it's just trying to get their voices heard, and it's okay to not be okay. What I picked up with you, Steve, amongst many things, was your protective cloak, and I use the word self-preservation quite a lot. So on a personal level, I've gone through divorce 5 years, so my identity, it's a loss of identity, isn't it? So a purpose and a loss of identity kind of, for me, linked hand in hand, really. But I have got a purpose, and it's either my 13 and 16-year-old give me purpose on a personal level, but on a work level, I love what I do. I love word. I do love going to work, and I do believe what I, can offer the college. However, higher level and management, the red tape around it is very frustrating, and strangulating is quite a strong word, isn't it? But so I'm in the middle of looking now, do I branch out into professional, you know, into the real world. College isn't really a real world, it's like a bubble, isn't it? If I'm allowed to say that. I don't, it's being recorded, but none of my bosses are here. We're in a bubble in education, so we're protected. So nobody really has to take ownership high up, because it's not their business. They're not going to lose their job, well, they may lose their job, but they're not going to lose sleep over, you know, a lost business because they're not having to feed. Do you know what I'm trying to say? You know, it's not a private company. It's not their own company. They're working for somebody else. They're working for a higher, you know, chief exec goes across very, you know, 5 campuses. So I'm rambling on a little bit, but I'm hoping that I'm making sense here. But yeah, I might actually branch into the private sector is what I'm trying to say, I think. And that is a big focus for me now, is to find repurposing or reevaluate where I'm at, because my beliefs and values are clashing really with the college. And I'm not a negative person, and I'm very much embracing change, but the frustrations there are taking over my enjoyment really. Is that, I think that's enough.
I think change is always a really difficult process to go through. It doesn't matter which side you're on, whether you're pro change or against the change. It's always going to be difficult for everyone involved. What I always say is that changing is the only constant. Sorry, I have 3 cats. They will interrupt all of my calls every day. Yeah, change is the only constant. So it's this change or it's the next change, and people, you have to pick which one's the right one to get on board with, and which ones that you have to fight against. Because if the change isn't well reasoned, it doesn't matter how positive it is as an action. A poorly reasoned change will likely fail or cause a lot more issues than it solves. Whereas if you've got really good reasons and justifications and the data to back it up, it'll be harder for people to argue against it, and it will reduce the amount of aggravation that it causes for everyone. Sorry, my cat's derailed my focus as well. Also, this is a really good mental health solution.
Steve, thank you so much for your talk. There were a few things that really stood out to me. The image that you created and shared with us, that very personal story of standing on that train platform, and just how close we can all be at some point in our lives of teetering from that level 7 to an 8 or a 9. And it just made me think what you were talking about was that the solutions that have been created by organizations are not necessarily fit for purpose. And that's why I'm glad that your organization exists. It feels as though there is far more systemic work that needs to be done. But in order to do that, it involves the opening of the Pandora's box that organizations may not want to do. And I was also struck about this idea of responsibility, that it's the organization's responsibility to ensure the wellness, emotional, physical wellness of their workforce, not just when things go wrong. But I really liked what you shared about the proactive approach to mental health. It linked with some of the ideas that I work with around proactive, preventative mental health awareness education for women. We know that pregnancy and early motherhood is going to be a change and is going to be stressful. But I think we also need to hold our hands up and say workplaces inherently can be, wherever you get interactions with other people, those are going to be a source of stress, or where we get interactions with when we're tasked to undertake a challenge, those are by definition just periods of stress. So we should know that people, those sorts of organizations, any organization, is going to create an opportunity, fertile ground for us for our mental health to slip into that, the mentally unwell realm. And just that scale, I think the scale that you referred to was really helpful for us to think about. We're all along this scale at some point, and the chronic nature of, being repeatedly at a 6 over time may well be the thing that suddenly pushes us instantly to a 9. That chronic nature over time can be just as harmful as an acute episode of mental ill health. So thank you so much for sharing. A lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. If it's okay, I will have to move away from the screen slightly when you said thank you for our organisation, because that's my purpose. That's what I'm, that's what I'm here for. I have some strong Christian friends who believe that there's a reason why, and I've got someone or something sitting on my shoulder that's driving this. I don't talk about that a massive amount, because that's not for me to impose or believe on anyone else. But the reality for me is exactly everything that you've just said. And if I think about our industry as a male-dominated industry, and it's not the only one, it actually becomes a toxic environment for women to be in, because there is an expectation that women are going to be strong, tough, aggressive, competitive. And I know this happens in Julianne's environment as well, for females going into that sector as well. And as a result, that this is where we end up with a diversity and inclusion problem, because, we burn people that come in the car industry in particular. We've had a legacy of employing people in our own likeness. And the reason for that is that a lot of managers have been promoted on the basis of confidence, not competence. And therefore, what we end up with is people, when it comes to recruiting new people, they recruit the safe bet. And the safe bet is someone who looks, sounds, acts, and has been where I've been. And that is not out in a motor trade setting, and maybe in construction, and maybe in legal, or wherever it might be. That is not, or hasn't traditionally been, taking on board somebody who sits outside of that picture of the world, that map of the world, because the problem with that is that's risky for then for me as a manager. And I've got here by my confidence, not by my competence. So therefore, what I'm going to do is put my own head above the parapet, and I'm going to cause me to be the center of attention if that decision goes wrong. And so that's why I don't know if I mentioned, but I've joined the IMI, the Institute of the Motor Industry's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force recently, and I'm proud to be one of a number of white middle-aged guys to sort this problem out. And that's the reality of what we've got in this task force, because that's what exists in the industry. So thank you, Stacey. I genuinely do want to connect with as many of you as possible. I know some of you have sent me connection requests already, and keep the conversation going afterwards.
I think it's all about little steps. We cannot expect to make those massive changes which have been ingrained into the way we are and the way we live within 6 weeks. This has to be a process. But I think that the more people learn about it and the more people know about it, men and women. And I agree with you, AC, that I was possibly a little bit too quick earlier to demote us all from being CEOs or not. But the way it goes, it shows that I'm working predominantly with men, simply because there are more men in leading positions. If it would be the other way around, I would predominantly work with women, I would guess. And in exactly that way, I think we can only take one step at a time, and I think that's good enough. We all do our best.
We've got sort of 6 minutes left. So the invitation is to just say some words briefly that give you a sense of closure, perhaps reflecting on something you've learned or you've heard that's making you think. And then I'll just ask Steve if he's got anything else he wants to say at the end.
Oh, I'll just add there then, if that's okay. It's not something new, but it's something that I believe strongly. Just to quote a LinkedIn that I shared a couple of weeks ago, in terms of schools are on the edge of a mental health crisis. So whilst we're here doing, you know, this fabulous, you know, well, that's a bit of a crass word, but you know what I mean, in terms of what we're doing now within our workforce, I believe that the issues or the mental health crisis in schools, it needs to start in primary school. So whilst we're having this conversation at my age at 46, I would like to know or feel that by the time my 13-year-old and 16-year-old are in a workforce, that they are not still having these conversations. But I believe that it has to come from, you know, primary school and beyond, really, to say it's okay to speak out, it's okay to not be okay, and not to have, just to quote my school, my children's secondary school, there's one counsellor for 1,300 students. So where, you know, who can they talk to? They don't have mental health first aiders. However, they have a poster of mental health first aiders, but there's no meat there, there's nobody there. So I don't want to start anything new. All I will say is I believe that, yes, we're doing, you know, what we can do at our age within our workforce, but I do believe it needs to start in primary education to and I know that the Prince William and Kate, they're very big advocates, aren't they, for various charities, but it just needs to come from high up, a lot of money to be pumped into it, and just get these little 5-year-olds talking about, you know, feelings and it's okay to not be okay. Thank you.
I'll go quickly because I have to drop at 1:30 on the nose. So for me, I really like that model, the power of meaning. And I do a lot of internal soul searching. You know, what's it all for? What's the meaning of life, etc. So just that purpose piece really resonated for me. And I said to Steve when we were in the breakout group, I feel like I'm just hearing purpose a lot at the minute, and it's really making me sort of reflect personally around myself and my life decisions, I guess.
There's a reason for that, Julianne.
Age.
My view is it's a sort of it sounds very deep, but it's a kind of spiritual awakening. Janet's nodding vehemently there. And that doesn't have to be anything religious. It doesn't have to be anything, you know, in that respect. It's just you spiritually. It's waking up to it, and it's that's where it began for me. And it's there's a painful part of the journey, but you get there and you go, wow, you know.
For me, it's I completely agree with what you were saying, Gemma, about, you know, and Stacey said it as well, about being okay to not be okay. And I think that's so important. For me, it's about the power of difference and the power of, you know, I don't really like the term acceptance, because that almost says that the kind of the power is in the person to do the accepting, or else it's not okay. But kind of celebrating difference, I will say, and actually harnessing those experiences, those different experiences to develop our own understanding and our own journey, I think is really powerful. I was listening to somebody talking last week about why they identified as them and they. And I just found it really, really powerful to understand it from a point of view that I hadn't understood it, to give myself a different perspective and to develop my journey in that as well. So, yeah.
We are pretty much at the end. Do you want to just say any final words?
I'll just say thank you to everyone for getting stuck in and, you know, and contributing in the way that you have. And, you know, the whole spiritual awakening purpose thing, you know, it's important to me. I'm really passionate about it, as you can tell. And I think, you know, a lot of what we see in organizations where this is not happening is because of fear and because of ego. And, you know, even at the highest levels, you know, the people at the tops of organizations are struggling with their own issues. And that's what's causing us to not see this sense of purpose and this sense of direction that people crying out for. So for me, it's top down, but driven bottom up. And if we start doing that, you know, all we then need to work on is the bit in the middle that's constricting it, which might actually be middle management and stuff. But yeah, we're on a mission, and, you know, connect up with me on LinkedIn or whatever, and we'll keep talking. Thank you, Tom, as well, for letting me to have the stage for a bit. Thank you.
Well, it is a very important message, and of course we are very aligned, you and I, Steve. Mm-hmm. So I hope we can find a way to join forces in some respect.
And I would just say on that, actually, that when you and I first spoke, which was early, just before Christmas Eve, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months ago. Yeah. And we weren't aligned, were we? Because I think you came back to me a few times and said, I'm not quite sure what the message is. Yeah. And it's like it's been a journey throughout, you know, lockdown, January to March. And then we got back, we had a couple of conversations. Then we had one in, I think it was June time. And I sort of talked about it, and you sat back and you went, wow, I think your actual words were, where the bloody hell did that come from? Or something like that. So
well, I'm glad I trusted myself and trusted you, because you weren't ready then, and you really are now, and you're flying, and that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. It really means a lot. Thank you. Thank you all for being part of that. I'm going to go off and have a sob now. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We just need more of you, please.
Oh, thank you, Gemma. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much, Steve. Brilliant.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Come back in September. And hopefully we'll see you then.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.